Did you know that 5 out of every 4 people struggle with fractions? Also, did you know that some people say that math is 50% formulas, 50% proofs, and 50% imagination? Wait. If you didn't get those two jokes, good thing today's lesson is on fractions, decimals, and percents. In this lesson, there will be parts where you can use a calculator, and then other parts where you will be expected to know how to do the math without a calculator. So this first part, you can have a calculator. We're going to be dividing fractions and looking at the long decimal and then understanding how to round them properly. So here I've given you a rounding chart to help remind you, and we're going to round to different decimal places. So start with the first fraction, 27 over 99, and I want you to divide it and write the decimal out. So you should have 0.27 repeating, and now we're going to round to the nearest thousands. So on your chart here is thousands, which is 1, 2, 3 places away from the decimal. So I need to count 3 on my number. 1, 2, 3. 3 decimal places away is at that 2. And then after you determine that spot, you look to the right of it. If the number is 5 or larger, you have to round up. So this would round to 0.273. Okay, our next example, 41 over 85, we're going to round to the nearest hundredths. So once again, you're just going to divide 41 over 85 and then round to the hundredths, which is 2 decimal places. So here's the decimal, and then 2 decimal places would be at the 8. We have to look to the right of the 8, and it's a 2. So because 2 is below 5, we don't round up, we keep the same. So 0.48 stays the same instead of rounding up, and then everything else gets cut off. Alright, last one, we're going to round to the 10th place, which is only 1 place away from the decimal. Okay, our next fraction, 36 over 125. And when you divide, you get the decimal 0.288. Alright, 1 decimal place away, or yep, 1 spot away from the decimal is 2. Look to the right of the 2, we have an 8. Since the 8 is larger than 5, it tells you to round this 2 up, so 0.3. Good. I'm going to give you 2 problems that you can now try on your own. I want you to pause the video and I want you to find the decimal for both of these rounded to the nearest thousandth. Okay, here are your answers. How did you do? Now we're going to move the other way. Instead of fraction to decimal, we're going decimal to fraction. And I still have the rounding chart on there because of the word tenths and hundredths and thousandths. That is going to help us. So our first one, 0.24. I want you to think, what is the proper way of saying that number? Not just 0.24. If there are 2 place values to the right of the decimal, you're looking at the hundredths value. So the proper way of saying that is 24 hundredths. Well, let's just write 24 hundredths as a fraction. 24 hundredths. And now we just have to simplify that fraction. So what can you divide both of those by to reduce? Let's see, I know they're both even, so I could cut them both in half. But I also know that you can divide them both by 4, so let's see what happens when you divide them both by 4. You get 6 over 25, and that is fully simplified. So we went from this decimal, 0.24, which is 24 100ths, and then reduce it to 6 over 25. Okay, this next one, 1.9, what do we do when you have a number in front of the decimal? Well, that means you have a mixed number. So, what is the proper way of saying 1.9? You have a 1 in front, and that's 9/10 because it only has one place value after the decimal. So 1 and 9/10, 1 and 9/10, and then can you simplify it any more? No, that is all the way done. So that was a nice and easy one. Okay, and this last one, 2.345. If there's a number in front, you will have a mixed number, so 2. And then how do you say 0.345 properly? 3 decimal places would be thousandths, so you have 345 thousandths. And then we have to reduce that fraction. So 2 and something. Well, I know they're both divisible by 5 because one ends in 5 and one ends in 0. So divide them both by 5 and see what you get. You should get 69 over 200, which is fully simplified. So your answer is 2 and 69/200ths. Last two examples converting decimal to fraction. I want you to write these down and pause the video, see if you can figure them out on your own. You should get 21/50ths and then 7 and 8/25ths. If you have any questions, let me know. In the last part of the lesson, we will just focus on the equivalencies between fraction, decimal, and percent, because we can have 3 different ways of writing the same number. For the most basic example, let's think about the fraction 1/2. Well, we know that the decimal is 0.5 and that the percent is 50%. So 3 ways of writing the exact same number. So obviously, we're going to do some more of those that are a little bit more complicated. One quick thing to keep in mind, when you are changing from a decimal to a percent, you could think about it as multiplying by 100. So if you have 0.45 as your decimal, to change it to a percent, you can multiply by 100. When you multiply by 100, it's the same thing as moving the decimal twice because you have 2 zeros. So 0.45 is 45%. And now going backwards, if you are changing from a percent to a decimal, you could think about it as dividing by 100. If you have 25%, you can do 25 over 100, which is 0.25. It's moving the decimal the other way, 2 spots. So now the last part of the lesson, I will give you 4 examples where I will give you an example of either a fraction or a decimal or a percent, and then you'll have to find its equivalencies. Starting with the fraction 1/5. We need to find its decimal, and you can do this a couple different ways. One, if you divide 1 divided by 5, you'll get the decimal. But I think this is a fraction that you should have the decimal memorized, because an equivalent way to write 1/5 is 2/10. And then 2/10 as a decimal is 0.2. Now to change this to the percent, you have to think, is it 2% or is it 20%? You move the decimal twice. Moving it once would be 2. Move it a second time, add a 0, so it is 20%. Next, let's start with the decimal, 0.08, or you could say 8/100ths. So you can go either way. Let's do percent first. Move the decimal twice, which means this is 8%. And then as a fraction, I said that the proper way of saying it is 8/100ths. And now you just have to simplify it. You could cut them both in half, which is 4/50ths. You can cut them in half again, which is 2/25. Okay, next one, starting with a percent. Let's start with 68%. How do you write 68% as a decimal? Well, we can move the decimal that's imaginary right here, move it the other way, move it 2 places to the left, so it's 0.68. And then as the fraction, that is 68/100ths. So start it out 68/100. And how do you simplify that? We could start by cutting that in half. 34/50. Cut it in half again. 17/25. Okay, last one, 4.92. So this time, let's see, we have a number in front, which means our percentage is going to be above 100%. Because if we move this decimal 2 places to the right, we're at 492%. And then to write this as a fraction, if you have a number in front, remember it's 4, and then this is 92/100ths, 92/100. But now we just have to simplify that, so it is 4/4 and 23/25. Oh my goodness, fractions, decimals, percents. My head is going to explode.